There is a precise moment when every relationship reveals itself. It is not when we fight for the first time, nor when we discover each other's flaws. It's when we wake up one morning, look at the person next to us and feel nothing. No butterflies. No butterflies in our stomach. Just an ordinary person breathing next to us. In that second, a question cuts like a knife. Is this all there is? The train station in Disenchantment never stopped existing. It's in every relationship that lasts longer than 18 months. We've all been there, torn between nostalgia for what was magical and the choice of what could be real, between running away on the next train or accepting that the platform is where real life happens. David Lean's film captured something that modern culture would rather forget, that there is a huge difference between being in love and choosing to love. A difference that defines not only our relationships, but who we choose to be as human beings. Because while passion happens to us, love is something we build, and building hurts. Building is tiring. Building forces us to admit that chemistry isn't enough, that compatibility isn't a guarantee, that even the people we love are in the end just people. There is a silent cruelty in the transition from passion to love. It's like waking up from a lucid dream and discovering that reality has fewer colors. But perhaps it is precisely there, in that calculated disillusionment, that we find something more valuable than magic itself, the possibility of creating meaning when nature has only placed chemistry. Simone de Beauvoir knew this when she wrote that one is not born a woman, one becomes a woman. The same logic applies to love. One is not born loving, one chooses to love. And that choice made every day in the desert of disenchantment may be the most courageous act of human existence. Passion lies to us so convincingly that we confuse it with the truth about love. It makes us believe that feeling is enough, that intensity is synonymous with depth, that what keeps us awake at night also completes us as people. It is a beautiful chemical irresistible lie, and for that very reason dangerous. Neuroscience has proven it. The brain in love works like an addicted brain. Abnormal levels of dopamine, compromised prefrontal cortex, reduced critical thinking. When we are in love, we literally think less. The other person becomes a drug, and we become socially accepted chemical addicts. We obsessively check WhatsApp, interpret every silence as rejection, every response as a declaration of eternal love. But passion carries an evolutionary cruelty. It expires. It has an expiration date like yogurt in the fridge. 18 months, 2 years at most. After that, the chemistry normalizes. The prefrontal cortex regains its functions, and we wake up as if from an altered state of consciousness. The other person appears for the first time as they really are. It is at this moment that we discover something disturbing. We were never in love with a real person. We were in love with a projection, an edited and romanticized version of someone we invented in our own minds. Passion makes us involuntary screenwriters. We create an irresistible character and attribute it to the person next to us. Laura, the protagonist of Disenchantment, experiences exactly this when she meets Alec at the train station. She doesn't fall in love with the doctor he really is, but with the possibility of a breakup that he represents, with the chance to feel alive again in a life that has become too predictable. Alec could be anyone. What matters is that he is not her husband, and here lies the cruelest paradox of passion. The more intense it is, the less personal it is. Passion is interchangeable. It is a state we project onto different people throughout our lives, always with the same feeling that this time it's different, this time it's forever. But passion is not about the other person. It is about ourselves experiencing a specific chemical state that evolution has programmed us to feel. Simone de Beauvoir understood this when she lived her relationship with Sartre. They never married, never had children, never followed the traditional script of romantic love. Instead, they built something more radical, an intellectual and emotional partnership based on the daily choice to be together, even when the initial passion wore off. Authentic love must be founded on the mutual recognition of two freedoms, wrote Beauvoir. Translation: real love only happens when we stop needing the other person to feel complete and freely choose to share our incompleteness with them. But this requires something that passion never taught us: to accept that disenchantment is not the end of the story, but the beginning. That when the chemistry stops doing the work for us, we can finally start building something of our own. The question is, how many of us are brave enough to do that? There is a word that our culture has learned to whisper as if it were a disease: disenchantment. We talk about it as if we are admitting a personal flaw, a failure to keep alive the magic we once felt. But what if we are interpreting everything wrong? What if disenchantment is not the end of the love story, but the moment when it can finally begin? In the film Disenchantment, Laura returns home after saying goodbye to Alec for the last time. The camera follows her as she walks through familiar streets, each step taking her back to a life that now seems smaller, grayer. But there is something in her eyes that wasn't there before. a new awareness, painful but also liberating. She saw what she was willing to lose and chose not to lose it. Disillusionment is the first experience of emotional sobriety we have in adulthood. It's when we wake up from a chemical dream and see for the first time who we are really sharing our bed, our home, our days with. And the person we see is not the character we invented in our heads during the months of passion. It's someone who smells like morning, who is grumpy before coffee, who has annoying opinions about movies we love. They are real. Simone de Beauvoir called this the recognition of the other as a free consciousness, not as an extension of ourselves, not as a solution to our loneliness, but as a whole person, complete, with an inner life as complex as our own. A person who chooses to be with us not because they need to, but because they want to. But recognizing the freedom of another is terrifying. It means accepting that they can choose to leave at any moment, that our relationship is not sustained by chemical dependency or emotional need, but by something much more fragile and much more valuable, the daily decision to build something together. Modern culture has taught us to run away from this moment. We change relationships like we change channels when the show gets boring. We look for someone else to give us back the feeling of being in love, to make us feel special again. It's easier to start from scratch with someone new than to accept that the person we love is also just human. There is a silent brutality in this transition. For months, we live in a kind of parallel reality where every message is poetry, every encounter is cinema, every touch is a revelation. And then one day, we wake up and discover that the person next to us snores, that they leave dirty dishes in the sink, that they have questionable political opinions, that sometimes they are petty, sometimes boring, sometimes deeply human, in ways that don't fit into any romantic script. If you've made it this far in this video, you've probably felt this yourself. That moment when the person next to you lost their sparkle and you wondered if you were in the wrong relationship, with the wrong person, in the wrong life. The feeling that something has died and you don't know if it's worth trying to revive it. But what if what died was exactly what needed to die? What if the illusion of passion was just the scaffolding needed to build something more solid? Disillusionment carries a disturbing revelation. We were never in love with a person, but with an idealized version of them. When that version crumbles, we can finally see who is really there. And that discovery can be devastating or liberating, depending on our courage to embrace imperfection as the raw material of true intimacy. Laura knows this when she sits in her living room and looks at her husband reading the newspaper. He is not Alec. He never will be. He doesn't give her butterflies or make her heart race. But he is there. Every day he is there. Not out of obligation, not because he has no other choice, but because he has chosen to be there. Disillusionment reveals something that passion hides. That love is not a feeling that happens to us, but a practice we cultivate. It is not something we find, but something we create. And creating requires that we stop being victims of our own impulses and take responsibility for building meaning where nature has placed only biology. Beauvoir knew this when she wrote about her relationship with Sartre. They went through the passion phase, experienced disenchantment, and then did something radical. They decided to reinvent what it meant to be together. They created their own rules, defined their own terms, and built a partnership that transcended the social scripts of what a couple should be. But this transition comes at a price. It requires us to abandon the fantasy that someone can complete us and accept the responsibility of being complete people who choose to accompany each other. It requires us to stop seeking salvation in others and find the courage to save ourselves. Disenchantment is the gateway between two ways of existing, as people who love because they need to, and as people who love because they can. The difference between the two defines not only our relationships, but who we are as human beings. There is a scene in Disenchantment that lasts only a few seconds, but carries the weight of a lifetime. Laura is back home, sitting at the dinner table with her husband and children. The conversation flows normally: school, work, plans for the weekend. Nothing exceptional, nothing magical, just the rough texture of everyday life unfolding without a romantic soundtrack. But there is something new on Laura's face. Not resignation, but acceptance. Not giving up, but choosing. She is not there because she has nowhere else to go. She is there because she has decided to stay. That is the difference between love as a feeling and love as an act of will. Between being driven by forces we cannot control and exercising our most fundamental freedom, that of creating meaning where the world offers only circumstances. Simone de Beauvoir spent her entire life exploring this frontier. For her, human authenticity did not lie in following our impulses, but in transcending them, in consciously choosing who we want to be, even when, especially when, it goes against our biological programming. One is not born a woman, one becomes a woman, she wrote. The same logic applies to love. No one is born loving. Everyone becomes capable of loving. And becoming capable of loving is a painful process. It requires us to give up the fantasy that there is someone perfect for us waiting somewhere in the world to complete us. It requires us to accept that every person we choose to love will inevitably be a person with flaws, limitations, contradictions. A person who sometimes disappoints us, irritates us, makes us question our choices. Lucid love is love that survives this revelation. But there is a particular violence in this clarity. When the fog of passion clears, we see not only the other person's flaws, but also our own. We discover that we are not the charming character we portrayed on our first dates. We are people with insecurities, annoying habits, moments of pettiness. And we realize that the person who is with us also sees us this way, stripped of the emotional makeup we wore when we still needed to win them over. This is the most brutal test of love, continuing to choose someone after they have gotten to know you completely. After all the masks have fallen and there is nothing left to hide. It is easier to run away to a new passion where we can once again be mysterious and fascinating than to face the emotional nakedness of mature love. It's different from passion because it doesn't need illusions to exist. It's different from resignation because it keeps the choice active. It's love that looks at the other without romantic filters and says, I see who you really are. I see your flaws, your quirks, your limitations. And yet I choose to build something beautiful with you. But our culture has taught us to fear this clarity. We prefer the temporary blindness of passion to the clear vision of conscious love, because seeing the other clearly also means being seen clearly. It means abandoning the protection of first encounters when we can still put on our best face and accepting the vulnerability of being known completely. Laura knows this when she looks at her husband during dinner. He has known her for years. He has seen her moods, her insecurities, her little everyday cruelties. He knows the sound of her breathing when she is nervous. He knows exactly how she looks when she is hungry. He has seen her cry for reasons she herself considers silly. And yet he chooses to be there every night, sharing the table with her. Not because she is perfect, but because he has decided that her imperfection is worth a lifetime of investment. This is the courage that modernity has lost. The courage to be known, to lay down the weapons of seduction and allow someone to see our scars, our neuroses, our less noble moments. It's easier to start over with someone who still sees us through the rose-colored glasses of the first date than to sustain true intimacy with someone who has seen us wake up hungover. Beauvoir and Sartre built exactly that. A love that didn't need novelty to stay alive. They knew each other deeply. They knew each other's weaknesses, contradictions, and moments of pettiness. And they used that knowledge not as a weapon, but as building material. They created an intimacy based on truth, not idealization. But that requires something that goes against all our instincts. The willingness to disappoint and be disappointed. To discover that the person we love is not a fairy tale, but a complex and imperfect human being. And then make the most radical choice of all, to continue loving anyway. Lucid love does not promise constant happiness. It promises something more valuable, the possibility of building meaning through conscious choice, of creating something greater than ourselves through the daily decision to honor a commitment that transcends our moods and impulses. It is love that looks at the desert of disenchantment and decides to plant a tree. There is a moment in Laura's life that the film does not show, but that we can feel. It is when she wakes up the morning after her final goodbye to Alec, when she opens her eyes and sees the same ceiling as always, hears the same sounds of the house waking up, feels the same weight of everyday life settling on her shoulders. But something has changed, not because she has experienced a great passion, but because she has chosen not to live. That choice, not to leave on the train, reveals something fundamental about what it means to be human. We are not just creatures driven by impulses. We are beings capable of resisting our own desires when they conflict with something greater than ourselves. We are capable of choosing difficulty. Simone de Beauvoir understood this better than anyone. Her entire philosophy was built on a simple and revolutionary idea. We are condemned to be free. Every moment of life is a choice, and every choice defines who we are. There is no destiny, no fixed nature, no pre-written script. There is only the terrifying and liberating responsibility to decide at every moment who we want to be. In love, this freedom becomes even more radical, because to truly love means choosing every day to build something with someone who is also choosing. Not because passion compels us, not because society expects it, not because we have no alternatives, but because we decide it is worth it. And here is the most beautiful paradox of human existence. The more difficult the choice, the more it defines us. Anyone can fall in love. It's involuntary, chemical, instinctive. But choosing to love after the passion has passed, building intimacy after the enchantment has broken, committing to someone we know completely, that requires something only humans possess, the ability to create meaning where the universe offers only chance. Laura could have run away with Alec, She could have abandoned her family, her children, the life she had built. She could have followed her impulse, her passion, the promise of a more exciting life. But she did something braver. She chose to stay, not out of resignation, not out of fear, but because she understood that there was something more valuable at stake than her own immediate happiness. She chose to honor a commitment that transcended her momentary feelings. She chose to build something lasting instead of consuming something intense. She chose to be someone who keeps her word, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, even when no one is looking. That is the difference between living like an animal and living like a human being. Animals follow their instincts. Humans can choose to go against them. We can decide that there is something more important than our immediate satisfaction, something more valuable than our individual pleasure. We can choose difficulty because it makes us who we want to be. Beauvoir and Sartre made that choice every day for more than 50 years. Not because it was easy. They fought, betrayed each other, hurt each other, disappointed each other, but because they had decided that building something together was worth more than seeking perfection apart, that creating an authentic partnership was more important than living a perfect romance. Mature love isn't about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. It's not about being completed by someone else, but about choosing to complete someone else. It's about looking at the other person's imperfections and deciding that they are exactly the imperfections we want to learn to dance with. When Laura returns home that last night, she is not returning defeated. She is returning victorious. Victorious over her own impulses, over the tyranny of feelings, over the dictatorship of immediate pleasure. She proved to herself that she is capable of something greater than following her desires. She is capable of following her values. And perhaps that is the deepest truth about love. It's not about feeling, but about choosing. It's not about passion, but about character. It's not about what happens to us, but about what we decide to do with what happens to us. The train will continue to pass by the station. There will always be other passions, other possibilities, other chances to escape the difficulty of real love. But some people, the bravest ones, choose to stay on the platform. Not because they can't leave, but because they have decided that there is something more valuable than leaving. The possibility of building something that transcends themselves. In the end, loving is not about finding someone perfect. It's about becoming someone capable of honoring an imperfect commitment. It's about discovering that the greatest freedom isn't in following our impulses, but in choosing something greater than them. It's about learning that sometimes the most revolutionary decision is simply to stay. What about you? Have you ever felt the weight of this choice between leaving and staying? Write in the comments about the moment you decided to choose the difficulty of real love. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos, you reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.